As I walked through the front door, I could feel the weight of the day lifting off my shoulders. Work had been exhausting, and all I wanted was a quiet evening at home. But as soon as I stepped inside, I sensed something was wrong. The air was thick with tension, and I saw Darla standing in the living room, her hands twisting nervously. "Darla," I called out, my voice filled with concern. "What's going on?" She looked up at me, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "Dick, we need to talk," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course, dear," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I walked over to the armchair and sat down, bracing myself for whatever was coming next. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, her eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape. I want a separation," she finally said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Possibly a divorce." For a moment, I felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under me. But years of marriage had taught me to keep my emotions in check. "All right," I said calmly, even though my heart was pounding. "I'll pack my things." Darla's eyes widened in shock. "That's it? You're just going to leave?" "I think it's best if we give each other some space," I said, getting up and heading towards the bedroom. "I'll be out of your way in no time." As I packed my suitcase, memories of our 24 years together flashed through my mind. The good times, the struggles, the moments that defined our marriage. I returned to the living room with 2 suitcases in hand and placed them by the door. "Dick, wait," Darla said, her voice trembling. "Don't you want to talk about this? Aren't you angry?" I looked at her, trying to read the emotions playing across her face. "Darla, if this is what you want, then I respect your decision. But I have one condition." "What is it?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. "If you engage in any sexual activity with anyone else, we will immediately proceed with a divorce," I said firmly. "If you're just trying to find yourself, we can reconsider when you've done that. But I won't tolerate any infidelity." Darla's mouth opened and closed a few times, but no words came out. She was clearly taken aback by my calm demeanor and quick action. I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket and handed it to her. "Here's my new address and phone number. You can still reach me on my mobile." Before she could respond, I dialed a number on my cell phone. "Becky, this is Dick," I said, my voice steady. "Would you like to meet me for dinner on Friday?" "You know the answer, Dick," Becky laughed on the other end. "I'll be there with bells on." I hung up the phone and turned to Darla, who stood there, stunned and silent. "I'll see you around," I said, grabbing my suitcases and walking out the door. As I headed to my car, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. This was not how I had envisioned my evening, but maybe it was the beginning of something new. As I drove away, I couldn't help but wonder what the future held. Darla and I had shared so much, but perhaps it was time for both of us to find out who we really were, apart from each other. For now, I would focus on the present and take things one day at a time. The drive to the restaurant was quiet, my mind racing with the events of the day. Darla's announcement had left me reeling, but I had to keep moving forward. I pulled into the parking lot and took a deep breath before stepping out of the car. The familiar sign of our favorite steakhouse greeted me, and I felt a small sense of comfort in the routine. Becky was already waiting at a corner booth, her smile warm and inviting. "Hey, Dick," she greeted me as I slid into the seat across from her. "How are you holding up?" I shrugged, trying to muster a smile. "It's been a rough day, Becky, but I'm here, and that's a start." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm glad you called. You don't have to go through this alone." The waitress arrived to take our orders, and we both decided on the steak, our usual choice. As we waited for our food, Becky and I chatted about work and life, avoiding the heavier topics for now. Darla really blindsided me. I admitted after a while, the words coming out before I could stop them. "I didn't see it coming." Becky nodded, her eyes full of understanding. "Sometimes people change in ways we don't expect. But you're strong, Dick. You'll get through this. Our steaks arrived, and for a while, we focused on eating. The familiar taste of the food brought a sense of normalcy to the evening, a small reprieve from the chaos of the day. After dinner, we decided to head back to my new apartment, a modest place I had rented on a whim when things with Darla started to feel off. We sat on the couch, sipping wine, and talking about everything and nothing. Becky's presence was a soothing balm to my frayed nerves. I realized how much I had missed simple companionship. Remember that time we went to that awful team-building retreat? Becky said with a laugh, breaking the silence. I chuckled, shaking my head. How could I forget? I think we spent more time trying to avoid the activities than participating. She grinned, leaning back against the couch. You were always good at making the best of a bad situation. I looked at her, feeling a rush of gratitude. Thanks for being here, Becky. I don't know what I would have done tonight without you. She smiled softly. You're welcome, Dick. Anytime. As the night wore on, the conversation grew more personal. Becky shared stories about her late husband and the challenges she faced after his passing. I found myself opening up about my marriage, the good times, and the struggles. I always thought Darla and I would make it through anything, I said quietly. But now, I don't know. Becky placed a hand on my shoulder. It's okay to feel lost, Dick, but you'll find your way, and you don't have to do it alone. Her words were comforting, and as the evening drew to a close, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. Becky stayed the night, not out of pity, but out of genuine friendship and support. In the quiet of the early morning, as the first light of dawn filtered through the window, I realized that maybe, just maybe, this was the start of a new chapter in my life. A chapter where I could rediscover who I was, with a little help from a good friend. As we sat together, sharing the silence, I felt a flicker of hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't walking it alone. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside my window. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft glow over the room. I stretched and looked around, the events of the previous day flooding back. Becky was still asleep on the couch, a blanket pulled up to her chin. I quietly got up, careful not to wake her, and made my way to the kitchen. As I brewed a pot of coffee, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from Darla. We need to talk. I sighed, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. I knew this conversation was inevitable, but that didn't make it any easier. I took a deep breath and typed back, okay, when and where? Her response was quick. Can you come over now? I glanced at Becky, who was stirring awake. I have to go see Darla, I said, pouring a cup of coffee and handing it to her. Becky nodded, her eyes still heavy with sleep. Do you want me to come with you? No, it's something I need to do alone, I replied. But thank you. She gave me a reassuring smile. I'll be here when you get back. With a heavy heart, I drove back to the house that had been my home for so many years. As I walked up the driveway, I felt a pang of nostalgia. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. Darla opened the door, her face a mixture of sadness and resolve. Come in, she said softly, stepping aside to let me in. We sat down in the living room, the tension between us palpable. Darla was the first to speak. Dick, I need to understand something, she began, her voice shaky. Why did you pack your bag so quickly? And why did Becky answer your phone last night? I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. Darla, you asked for a separation. I respected your decision and acted accordingly. As for Becky, she's just a friend who was there to support me. Her eyes filled with tears. It just feels so sudden. 1 minute we're together, and the next, you're gone. Darla, you blindsided me, I said, my voice firm but calm. You dropped a bombshell on me out of nowhere. I needed to protect myself, to find some stability. She wiped her eyes, taking a deep breath. I understand, but it hurt to see how quickly you moved on. I leaned forward, my tone softening. Darla, I never wanted this, but you made a choice, and I had to respond. I need you to be honest with me now. Why did you really want a separation? She looked down, her hands trembling. It was Dr. Burns, she admitted. He convinced me that if we were separated, it wouldn't be considered cheating if we were together. I felt a surge of anger, but kept it in check. Darla, I suspected something was off. That's why I hired a private investigator. I know about Burns and his past. Her eyes widened in shock. You hired a PI? Yes, I replied. And I found out that he's been manipulating you. He's done this before, to other women. Tears streamed down her face as she absorbed my words. I feel so foolish, she whispered. I let him get into my head. I reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. Darla, we all make mistakes. But now you need to decide what you really want. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with regret. I want to make things right, Dick. I want us to work through this. I nodded slowly, feeling a glimmer of hope. If that's what you truly want, we can try. But it won't be easy. We need to rebuild trust, and that takes time. I know, she said, her voice steadying. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. We sat there in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling over us. Finally, I stood up. I'll come back later to talk more, I said. But for now, let's take it one step at a time. Darla nodded, a small smile breaking through her tears. Thank you, Dick, for giving us a chance. As I walked back to my car, I felt a sense of clarity. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in a long while, I felt that we were heading in the right direction. With a renewed sense of purpose, I drove back to my apartment, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions and contemplation. Darla and I agreed to meet again at the house, hoping to find some clarity and a way forward. I arrived in the late afternoon, the sun casting long shadows across the front yard. As I walked up to the door, I could feel the weight of the conversation that lay ahead. Darla opened the door, looking more composed than the last time we spoke. Hi, Dick, she said, her voice steady but soft. Hi, Darla, I replied, stepping inside. The familiarity of the house hit me, a mixture of comfort and sorrow. We made our way to the living room and sat down on the couch. Dick, there's something I need to tell you, Darla began, her hands nervously clutching the edge of her sweater. Something I should have told you from the start. I nodded, urging her to continue. I'm listening, Darla. She took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on a spot on the floor. Dr. Burns, he wasn't just a colleague. He was trying to seduce me. For months, he kept pushing and I didn't know how to handle it. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my anger in check. So he was trying to break us apart. Yes, she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. He told me that if we were separated, it wouldn't be cheating if we were together. He made me feel so confused, so unsure of everything. I took a deep breath, struggling to stay calm. Darla, why didn't you tell me sooner? I was scared, Dick, she said, her voice breaking. Scared of what you would think, scared of losing you. And part of me believed him. I was so unhappy, and he made it seem like he had all the answers. I leaned forward, my heart aching for her. Darla, you should have come to me. We could have worked through this together. I know, she sobbed, covering her face with her hands. I was so stupid. I let him get inside my head, and I nearly destroyed our marriage because of it. I reached out and gently pulled her hands away from her face. Darla, listen to me. We all make mistakes. What's important now is that you're honest, and we try to move forward. She nodded, wiping away her tears. I want to fix this, Dick. I want us to be strong again. But I don't know if you'll ever be able to trust me after this. I sighed, feeling the weight of her words. Trust takes time, Darla. It's not going to be easy, but if we're both committed, we can rebuild it. We sat in silence for a moment, the air heavy with the gravity of our conversation. Finally, Darla spoke again. "Dick, there's more," she said, her voice trembling. "I found out that Burns is being investigated for inappropriate behavior with other women. He's a predator, and I almost fell into his trap." I felt a surge of anger, but quickly pushed it down. "Darla, you're not the only one he manipulated. But we need to focus on us now, on how we can heal." She nodded, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I want to do whatever it takes to make this right. I'm willing to go to counseling, to talk about everything, to be completely open with you." I took her hand, squeezing it gently. "That's a start, Darla. We'll take it one day at a time, but we have to be honest with each other from now on. No more secrets." "I promise," she said, her voice filled with determination. "No more secrets." As we sat together, holding hands, I felt a small but significant shift. The path ahead was uncertain, but we were finally taking steps toward healing. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, I felt that we were truly in it together. That night, as I left the house, I felt a mix of emotions. There was still a long road ahead, but Darla's confession had opened a door to understanding and potential reconciliation. For the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope for our future. In the weeks that followed Darla's confession, we began to navigate the rocky terrain of our new reality. It was clear that if we were going to rebuild our marriage, we needed to establish some ground rules and work on our relationship step by step. One evening, we decided to meet at a quiet cafe downtown to discuss how we would move forward. The cafe was a small, cozy place with warm lighting and soft music playing in the background. As I walked in, I saw Darla sitting at a corner table, a cup of tea in front of her. She looked up and smiled weakly as I approached. "Hi, Dick," she said softly. "Hi, Darla," I replied, taking a seat across from her. "How are you holding up?" "I'm trying," she admitted. "I've been thinking a lot about what we need to do to make this work." I nodded. "Me too. We need to set some clear boundaries and expectations if we're going to have any chance of rebuilding our trust." She took a deep breath and nodded. "I agree. Where do we start?" "Well," I began, "for starters, we need to be completely honest with each other, no matter how difficult it might be. No more secrets." "I promise," Darla said, her eyes sincere. "No more secrets." "Good," I said. "And we need to make time for each other. Real, quality time where we can talk and reconnect." Darla nodded. "I've missed that, Dick. I want us to be close again, like we used to be." "We also need to address the intimacy issue," I continued. "It's important that we both feel wanted and loved. I don't want to go back to the way things were before, where we only had pity sex once in a while." Darla blushed but didn't look away. "I understand. I want to be more responsive, to make an effort to be a better partner for you. Let's set aside specific nights each week to focus on us," I suggested. "We can go out, stay in, whatever we feel like, but those nights will be just for us." "I'd like that," Darla said with a small smile. "I think it will help us reconnect." We spent the next hour discussing various aspects of our relationship, from how we would handle disagreements to how we could support each other's individual goals. It felt good to have an open and honest conversation, something we hadn't done in a long time. "There's one more thing," I said, hesitating slightly. "We need to address the issue of trust. It's going to take time for me to fully trust you again, and I need you to understand that." "I know," Darla said quietly, "and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn your trust back." "I appreciate that," I replied, "and I'll do my best to rebuild your trust in me as well." As we finished our drinks, I felt a sense of hope. We had a long road ahead of us, but for the first time in a long while, I felt that we were on the right path. We had a plan, and we were committed to making it work. "Shall we head home?" I asked, standing up. Darla nodded, and we walked out of the cafe together, side by side. The cool evening air was refreshing, and I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of renewal. As we drove back to the house, I glanced over at Darla. She looked more relaxed than she had in weeks, and I felt a flicker of optimism. This new arrangement was just the beginning, but it was a solid start. When we arrived home, we stood in the driveway for a moment, looking at each other. "Thank you for tonight, Dick," Darla said, her voice filled with emotion. "It means a lot to me." "Thank you too, Darla," I replied. "We're in this together." As we walked inside, I felt a sense of determination. We had faced many challenges, but we were finally taking steps towards healing. With patience, honesty, and a lot of effort, I believed we could rebuild the love and trust that had once defined our marriage. The weeks turned into months as Darla and I diligently worked on our new arrangement. We had our dedicated nights for each other, and slowly, the distance between us began to close. But I knew that for our relationship to truly heal, we needed a turning point, a moment that would solidify our commitment to one another. That moment came one Saturday afternoon. We had planned a simple day out, just a picnic at the park. It was something we used to do when the kids were young, and it felt right to revisit those memories. The park was bustling with families and children playing, the air filled with laughter and the smell of fresh grass. We found a quiet spot under a large oak tree, spreading out a blanket and unpacking our picnic basket. As we settled in, I noticed Darla seemed nervous, her eyes darting around as if she was searching for the right words. "Dick," she started, her voice trembling slightly. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you." I put down the sandwich I was holding and turned to face her. "What is it, Darla?" She took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto mine. "I want to apologize again, but this time, I want to do it properly. I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened and how I let you down. I realize now how deeply I hurt you, and I'm truly sorry." I could see the sincerity in her eyes, the remorse. "Darla, we've talked about this. I know you're sorry." "I know," she said, her voice firming up. "But I need to do more than just say it. I want to show you how much you mean to me, how much our marriage means to me." I watched as she reached into her bag and pulled out a small box. My heart skipped a beat as she handed it to me. "What's this?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "Open it," she urged, her voice barely above a whisper. I opened the box to find a beautiful, simple silver ring. "Darla, what?" "It's a promise ring," she explained, her eyes shining with emotion. "I know it's usually something you give before you get married, but I wanted to give it to you now as a symbol of my commitment to you, to us. I promise to be honest, to work on our relationship, and to never let anything come between us again." I was speechless for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. "Darla, I don't know what to say." "Just say you'll wear it," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "And that you believe in us." I slipped the ring onto my finger, feeling a rush of emotions. "I'll wear it," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "And I believe in us, Darla." She smiled through her tears, and we embraced, holding each other tightly. It felt like a turning point, a moment where we both fully committed to the future we wanted to build together. As we sat back down, the tension between us melted away. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking, laughing, and reminiscing about the past, but also planning for the future. The park seemed more vibrant, the laughter of children more joyous, and the world felt full of possibilities. Later that evening, as we lay in bed, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. Darla turned to me, her eyes soft and filled with love. "Thank you for giving us another chance," she whispered. "Thank you for fighting for us," I replied, kissing her forehead. "This is just the beginning." That night, as we drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, I knew that we had reached a turning point. It wasn't just the ring or the promises we made. It was the renewed sense of connection, the understanding that we were stronger together than apart. We had faced our darkest moments, and now we were ready to build a brighter future, one day at a time. As the weeks passed after our turning point at the park, Darla and I found ourselves on a journey of rebuilding trust. It wasn't easy, and it required effort from both of us. But the promise ring on my finger served as a constant reminder of our commitment to each other. One evening, we decided to cook dinner together. It was a simple activity, but it symbolized our efforts to reconnect. Darla was chopping vegetables while I prepared the meat for grilling. The kitchen was filled with the comforting aroma of garlic and herbs. "Remember when we first tried cooking together?" Darla said, smiling at the memory. "We nearly burned down the kitchen." I laughed. "Yeah, that was quite the disaster. But we learned, didn't we?" "We did," she agreed. "And we'll keep learning." As we worked side by side, I felt a sense of normalcy returning. We talked about our days, our hopes, and our fears. It was in these moments that we began to rebuild the foundation of our relationship. After dinner, we sat on the couch, a bottle of wine between us. The conversation turned serious, and I knew it was time to address the elephant in the room. "Darla, I need to ask you something," I said, looking into her eyes. "Do you ever regret staying with me? After everything that's happened?" She took a deep breath, her eyes softening. "No, Dick, I don't regret it. I regret my mistakes, but not the decision to fight for our marriage. You mean the world to me, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right." I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "I believe you, Darla, and I want you to know that I'm here, and I'm committed to us. But trust takes time, and we have to be patient." "I understand," she said quietly, "and I'm willing to be patient. I want us to be stronger than we were before." We spent the rest of the evening talking about how we could continue to rebuild trust. We agreed to be more open with our feelings, to communicate better, and to make time for each other, no matter how busy life got. A few days later, Darla suggested we see a marriage counselor. At first, I was hesitant, but I knew it could help us. Our first session was nerve-wracking, but as we talked through our issues with the counselor, I realized how much we both wanted to make things work. "Dick, how do you feel about the progress you and Darla have made so far?" the counselor asked during one session. "I feel hopeful," I admitted. "We've come a long way, and I can see how hard Darla is trying. It makes me want to try even harder." Darla smiled at me, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I feel the same way. I know I have to earn your trust back, and I'm ready to put in the work." Our sessions became a safe space for us to express our feelings and fears. We learned techniques to improve our communication and ways to handle conflicts without letting them escalate. Slowly but surely, the walls between us began to come down. One evening, after a particularly good counseling session, we decided to take a walk through our neighborhood. The air was cool, and the stars twinkled above us. "Do you remember our first date?" Darla asked, a hint of nostalgia in her voice. "How could I forget?" I said, chuckling. "We went to that little Italian restaurant, and you spilled wine all over my shirt." She laughed, squeezing my hand. "I was so embarrassed, but you just laughed and made a joke about how red was your color. I knew from that moment that I wanted to spend my life with you," I said, my voice softening. "And I still do." She stopped walking and turned to face me, her eyes glistening with emotion. "I feel the same way, Dick. I know we've been through a lot, but I believe in us. I believe we can be even stronger than before." I pulled her into a hug, feeling the warmth of her body against mine. "We will be, Darla. We've come this far, and we're not giving up now." As we continued our walk, hand in hand, I felt a sense of peace. Rebuilding trust was a slow process, but with each step we took, I could see a future where our relationship was not only healed but stronger than ever. We had faced our darkest moments, and now we were stepping into the light. Together, we were rebuilding the trust that had once been shattered, and with it, a love that was deeper and more resilient than ever before.